Good morning, everyone. Or should I say, Guten Morgen, liebe Menschen? It's very clear that I'm not German from saying that. And as Raphael said, I am in fact Scottish. Thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed yourself. I am in fact Scottish, but you won't find me cheering on my national sports teams. Because for me, guaranteed disappointment is not a thing that I really want in my life. However, there's some stuff about my Scottish heritage of which I really am quite intensely proud. Growing up, as a young Scot, I was told that my countrymen had invented the modern world. We'd invented television, the telephone, and the fax machine, but let's not talk about that. We invented the pneumatic tire. We invented the tarmac road to drive on. We invented the toaster and the refrigerator. Don't use them at the same time, they cancel each other out. We invented penicillin. We invented the hypodermic syringe, and I wanted some of that in my life. I wanted to be one of these innovation guys. So I ended up at least wanting to use my creative mind. So I became a musician. Then I became a stand-up comedian. And then I became an illustrator and a photographer and an artist. And I became a radio DJ, and I became a poet. I became a graffiti artist. And for 20 years of my life, I was an advertising creative. Please, don't hold it against me. I produced a lot of crap in that time. I really did. And the one thing that I really was interested in, though, was in innovation. I had been a patented inventor at some point through this. And for the last few years, I've been working with companies to help them become more creative, to help them become more innovative. And in the last few years, innovation's become this big thing. There's stages like this all over the world. There's overexcitable gurus who'll be getting people all hyped up about how they're going to change their company, how they're going to reinvent their industry, how they're going to disrupt stuff. However, who actually wants disruption? Like, seriously. How many of you here want your company to be disrupted? How many of you? I'm not counting many hands. How many of you here would consider yourselves to be a disruptive company? Yeah, I mean, a good handful of you. That's great. The most disruptive companies we have found out in recent years actually end up being the most disrupted companies. So the companies that start off being disruptive, by being different to everyone else in their industry, kind of have to keep that up because that's their point of difference. Because once you start disrupting something, people catch up. And then you're just a company. So if that's your point of difference, you have to keep moving. So how many of you here would say that you work for a startup, something that would be considered to be a startup? Right, actually, not that many. So how many of you here would say that you're, or maybe it's just your arms don't work. How many of you here would say that you work for an established company? I mean, there are a lot more hands. Yes, there you go. The arms have woken up. I mean, maybe you just want a bit of a shimmy because I think some of you might be in danger of getting deep vein thrombosis right now from sitting here. Maybe turn you so you don't get bed sores. So the idea of disruption is brilliant, isn't it? It's just one of these fantastically glamorous things. I mean, it's sexy. But as a guy who spent 20 years trying to sell creative ideas to companies that are in fact risk-averse, I think that a lot of this gospel of disruption is actually a utopian ideal rather than a practical business strategy. Because as far as I'm aware, companies go through a little bit of a life cycle. At the beginning of a company, they're highly creative, highly disruptive. Look at them all the way up there. They're having to define what they do. They're having to bring people in who who actually don't have one particular job that they do because there's just a small group of people. You know, they sort of smudgy edges between all the roles. And this is a super exciting time. This is the time when the company has some incredible magic to it. And then this process starts here, which is about process. It's about trying to take that magic and turn it into something that is replicatable, something that you can do consistently, something that you can do predictably. It's about taking that incredible, fiery thing that was unique and different about you and turn it into something that you can just keep selling to more people for more money, for less cost. Because as you keep going along here, things change again, and you go into another phase where it's all about doing things more economically. It's all about doing things cheaper and faster. Now, that is the exact opposite of being disruptive and creative, 180 degrees different. One is about embracing risk, one is about eliminating risk. One is about making stuff up as you go along on this journey, and the other is about doing the same thing again and again, cheaper, faster, more efficiently, more effectively. Totally, totally different. So, the whole thing with disruption is very much about let's rock the boat. In fact, more than that, it's about let's smash up the boat. You know, you've been working on this product. You've got this fantastic product here. Isn't this great? You've been doing this for a few years. That's how you're making your money. Right, forget about that. Let's reinvent your company to what it might be in 20 years' time. So hold on, you've got this gold here, and you're kind of just letting that go. So I think there's been such echo chamber nonsense that's been spouted in the last few years that as a Scotsman, I just like to take a grip of these things and shake them up. So I'm going to say some stuff that might upset some people here. It's going to be pretty contentious, but just bear with me, because all I'm trying to do is nudge you to maybe reconsider some stuff and to think slightly differently. Because I think instead of rocking the boat, instead of smashing the boat, we should be rocking the bandwagon. We should be smashing the bandwagon. You know, it is a sexy bandwagon, let's be honest. I mean, this is a heck of a bandwagon. It's covered in sequins and glitter. It's got like purple cushions, velvet, absolutely beautiful, and a mirror ball and 24-hour champagne. This is a fucking brilliant bandwagon, all right? But no, I think we need to rock it. I think we need to smash it. Because it's this Western myth of creativity, this idea that you can come up with something that's completely original, totally different, pluck it out the air like some kind of Aristotelian genius. It doesn't work like that. That's not the way creativity works. It's not the way innovation works. And I think that we need to let go of the myth that is this totally unique kind of idea and the myth that is disruption. This is a figure that boardrooms would really not be happy with, this number here. This is the failure rate of startups. 90% failure rate. 90%, sorry, for those who can't see it at the back, 90%, yeah? Failure rate, okay. That's the failure rate of startups. What if you sort of are doing innovation in your company and you go to the board and say, hey, yeah, you know, there's a 10% chance that we're going to succeed here with something. Are they going to give you the money for that? That'll be ridiculous. However, this is a sexy bandwagon, as I said. You know, it's got glitter and sparkles and a mirror ball. Come on. And that's why there's still a lot of money that's being thrown at this. In the UK last year, they invested 3.6 billion in startups. Now, I'm not hating on startups here. Believe me, I'm not hating on startups. I'm trying to point out that there's a difference here between startups and between proper, practical innovation. Right, 3.6 billion in the UK. 9 billion was invested in India in startups. And the US, of course, blows us all out of the water, 48.3 billion. Right, so I don't know if I told you, but this is the failure rate of startups. So if we just add up these three figures that we've got, admittedly 3 of the biggest investors worldwide in startups. If we just take that figure, it comes to that. I mean, it's a brutal and totally incorrect piece of mathematics, but it kind of indicates that about this amount of money is potentially just being poured down the toilet. You know, there you go, totally wiped out. That would buy you 12 aircraft carriers. No, this is the GDP of Panama. This is twice the GDP of Paraguay. This is 10 times the GDP of Malawi. It's quite a lot of money. And with a 90% failure rate and all that investment, then just from the investment of these 3 countries, this is the amount of money which is potentially being wasted. And and big companies are kind of doing these tech safaris where they go over to Silicon Valley. And the whole idea of bandwagons, it comes from the pioneers of the American West. And let me tell you the analogy there. That as people were traveling west, and you had the people discovering gold, you had the people who were way out there. They were the pioneers. They were going out themselves, or in small groups, and they were going out and they were discovering gold. They were discovering gold in the mountains. They were discovering gold in the rivers. This was brilliant. And the news got back that, hey, there's gold out there. So people went on bandwagons out west because it was easier to get there. They went in groups. And they went to these places where the pioneers had discovered the gold, and guess what? Gold was pretty much gone. There was more people scrabbling about for far less gold. That's what bandwagons is. There's no difference between the American West and the gold and what big businesses are doing by going in these tech safaris and trying to get a little bit of this startup magic. Excuse my bad spelling here. I just spotted that it's not loosing, it's losing. There's an extra O in there. But you know, that's part of what I do. I like to put extra O's on the end of people's balance sheets when I'm consulting for them. So I kind of, it just slipped into my language there. So there's a cultural difference. I just believe that companies that are really wanting long-term future success shouldn't be looking to Silicon Valley startup mentality to inform what they're going to do. And this is for all you people, even you startups. I don't think that startups should be looking to startups for inspiration. Because there's did I tell you, there's a 90% failure rate. You don't want to be part of that. You don't want to be one of those statistics. So why would we look to that for our inspiration? Okay, if you want that, I would say if you're a company that can convince your employees to work for you for just the promise of a bit of a share of some potential success that probably won't happen, rather than money, go for it. Do any of you think you can get your employees to do that? All right, that's startup land. If you can do that with your employees, then go for it. Copy the startups. Because that's what it takes. Culturally, these 2 things are incredibly different. Companies that look for long-term success and companies that are just looking to be bought out by Google within 7 years. Totally different. So don't think that the culture and the motivations of these 2 things are the same. Because let's look at this matrix here. We've got chance of success there, and we've got cost effectiveness on that axis. Right, this is where disruptive innovation sits. Low chance of success and a hell of a lot of money. Yeah? Okay. Do you think you can convince your board to play in that quadrant? Because I know that your board wants to play up there. Because that's where I want to play. Can you innovate in that top quadrant? Can you? Yeah, of course you can. It's one of the things that I want to talk about in a little minute, that I believe that you can have just as much fun up there. It's just as interesting. So I just want to reiterate, I don't hate innovation, all right? I love innovation. I'm just trying to make it really clear that there's a difference between companies that are after long-term success and companies that are going for the startup mentality. I just want to make that clear. I love innovation, I really do. And I don't hate disruption. It's just a different thing from constant long-term innovation success and disruption. And I'd really like to bring that to life with a bit of a story about, You know, when people talk about disruption, they very often talk about what is considered to be the most disruptive piece of technology that we have, the smartphone. Okay, so I want to tell you the 250-year history of the smartphone. In the late 1700s, the navies of the world started building bigger and bigger ships so that they could have bigger and bigger fights. Because that's where the fun is, isn't it? They escalate things. So these bigger and bigger ships, they still were sailing ships in these days. So they had great big tall masts. And you'd have a lookout up there at the top of the mast. During war and storms, it can get pretty noisy. So, you know, there was a difficulty when somebody was so far away up there in the wind actually sort of getting their message down there. So the sailors improvised something. And it was pieces of old sail that they twisted round to create a tube of canvas that they strapped to the mast. And they called this thing a speaking pipe. A voice pipe, sorry. And the voice pipe meant that the person who was up in the crow's nest was able to shout down this pipe of canvas to people down on the deck, and they were able to hear them. Isn't that great? That's smart. That's really clever. So what they did was they started to actually build ships with this technology built in. And when they invented the steamship, or should I say, when a Scotsman invented the steamship, after they'd invented the steam train, but let's not go there. I don't want to brag or anything. When they invented the steamship, they took this technology and they built it into the structure of the ship. So they had voice pipes that meant that you were able to be up on the deck and you were able to talk. The captain, with his great big wheel, because, you know, it's a wheel, it's like a penis extension or something like that, I don't know. Why is it so big? I don't get it. Right, so the great big wheel, and they wanted to talk to people who were down in the boiler room. And they created this pipe, a brass pipe, and there's a cork plug in it with a whistle. And they go into the whistle, and they'd be able to hear it down in the engine room, and they go, aye, aye, Captain. They'd say, yes, okay, put more coal in the fire, chip-top, chin-chin. Because, you know, they were people from really sort of upper class who were the ones who were the captains of the ship. So that was fantastic, that they were able to use this technology inside the structure of the ship. Now these people, because they were people with a lot of money from stately homes, when they got home, they decided to take this technology and actually build it into their houses. And that meant that they were then able to talk to the people down in the kitchen, to the servants. And they were able to ring a little bell. And they called it, at this point, it went from voice pipes to speaking tubes. So they had these speaking tubes built into the house. And they're able to say, okay, Marie, another gin and tonic and more cheese, please. Thank you. And because they all had to develop gout. It was traditional to develop gout. So they were able to talk to the people, the servants downstairs in the quarters, and they would bring up whatever they wanted. So they had these speaking tubes in the houses. That was just the same as a voice pipe, but it was in a house. So then electricity became all the rage. Everyone wanted a bit of electricity. You know, people would have electricity in their houses, and they'd invite people round, and they'd just flick a switch, and a light bulb would go on, and everyone would go, whoa! They'd switch off, and it's just, no way. It was amazing. It was a new thing. It was fantastic. You know, the internet was a bit like that at the beginning, and now everyone just rolls their eyes. So electricity came around, and then they decided to just do the exact same thing as a speaking tube, but with electricity. So they created something that looked just like a speaking tube, because the speaking tubes were built into the walls, and they put this box on the wall, and it had the little flared bit, just like a speaking tube, and because you weren't able to get a microphone and a speaker into the same device, you had to have the separate thing, to the speaker up there on a cable. Now, it was mounted in the wall, just like a speaking tube was. And I don't know if you know, but at the beginning, telephones, you bought them in pairs. You did. You bought a pair of telephones, and then you had to get a telephone engineer to connect them. So they got them built into houses. So you get the upstairs and downstairs, just like a speaking tube. But it was electricity. Ooh. And then what happened is the next thing, there was a form factor change. It was taken off the wall, and it was now in something that looked like a candlestick. And then from that, they took these two different things and they turned them into one single handset. So we're getting a form factor change now. And then in the 1980s, they cut the curly wire. And you were able to walk around your home using the magic of radio signals as you spoke. It was magic, I remember that. It was phenomenal. I remember seeing the first one, I couldn't believe it. Quality was awful, they just crackled. But, it was magic, it was amazing. And then, of course, the logical thing is, well, why tether people to the home at all? And you can just have a mobile phone that people can go out, and they don't need to be tethered to anywhere. And then, from that, we start to get miniaturization of technology. And we start getting cameras on chips. And we start being able to get more memory on memory cards. And then you can put in a headphone jack. And we start getting functions put into this device because we've got the miniaturized technology to put in. And then we get better screens that become cheaper. So the screen enlarges, and we get the ARM processor that becomes more and more powerful. And we end up with a smartphone. So you can see the similarity between this and a rolled-up piece of canvas, can't you? No, of course not. And that is innovation. To be able to get from a rolled-up piece of canvas, and even before that, where you can imagine where the first inspiration came from was probably some Paleolithic humanoid who found a hollowed-out tree trunk, and he was able to grunt down it to his friend at the other end. That was probably where it all came from. So this whole thing started maybe a couple of 100,000 years ago. But when they turned it into a product, that was the late 1700s, when they created the first voice pipe. So each of these stages has got a significant overlap of familiarity. That's the way it works. People talk about disruptive technology as if it's this. Things aren't actually connected, and you have to create these leaps. Here we are now. Now we're there. And there's where we're going. That's the way things go, that there's no overlap, and we're creating things that are completely new, that we're plucking out of the air. No. That's the way things work. You need to have more familiarity at each stage than you have something that's alien. That's really important. Familiarity is really important at each stage of innovation. So if that's the case, is it innovation or is it iteration? Depends what language you want to use to describe that. But to me, this is a much better process to be able to do that with your products and with your business as constant iteration rather than radical innovation. Because radical innovation, the word disruptive is actually quite good because it disrupts the crap out of your company. It's really expensive, it's high risk. People have to be retrained, you might have to hire people. It's very expensive. When you create something that's different, you might have to create a completely new production line to be able to do it. The distribution channels might have to be set up in a different way. The sales channels, you actually have to educate people on what this is all about. That's a really big cost, is trying to educate something about something that's completely new. Because consumers don't want to have to unlearn this to be able to take advantage of this. With this, they don't have to. Their knowledge evolves with you. You evolve with them. And that's why I think that there's a lot of crap round about the area of disruption. So, a little aside. When I was talking to Raphael and Chris about this, we were talking about the importance, of course, of openness and open software and the open standards of the web. And these are absolutely vital, this openness. Because one thing to notice through each of these stages of the telephone, of the smartphone, from this roll of canvas to what we have now, this slice of glass, is that what changed things, the biggest leaps, were actually created by the infrastructure. And the infrastructure changes through that was going from just two telephones connected to each other to be able to create a network. And it was those networks, it was that infrastructure development that completely changed everything and made the phone so much more useful and made more people want to get a telephone. That is what changed it. The internet, that is what changed it. The invention of electricity, again, that is what took this technology and spread it to more people. So it's the infrastructure, and again, the technology that was available. When we start to see the miniaturization, when we start to see more and more memory shoved into smaller and smaller spaces, that is what changed things. So really, was it the phone itself that was the main piece of innovation? Or was it the infrastructure and technology round about it? So it's really important for that stuff to be available. And I do innovation workshops with businesses and with organizations. And one of the things that I'll do is I'll give them a piece of technology, or I will give them an API, and I'll ask them to do something with it using this really important mantra. Actually, Raphael said I've got no problem just having that, so fuck you. So using this mantra, it's not about using the technology that's there, it's about abusing the technology that's there. Because if you just use it, if you just follow the rules and use it for what it is, you're doing what everyone else is doing. If you abuse it, you're going to stand out. And that's a really important thing, because we'll come to that in a little minute. So I want to talk about how to play in this quadrant up here, because this is something I've been looking at in recent years. And Raphael and Chris asked me if I'd be able to talk about a book that I'm working on at the moment, and I'm going to tell you the principles behind this book that's coming out next year. So I want to introduce you first of all to a friend of mine. This is Soon Yu. Soon was the head of innovation for a company called Vanity Fair, not the magazine, but a holding company that owned the North Face, Napapiri, Vans, Timberland, Wrangler, about 30 huge fashion brands. And in the 10 or so years that he was there as head of innovation, what he did was responsible for over $2 billion in revenue. So he was actually taking innovation and turning it into proper profit for the company. And he started doing some studies while he was there last year, and he was looking at what it was that made the most successful companies successful. Why was it that some products were just so wildly successful when others weren't? And naturally people think that it's a little bit of luck. That's what it's all about. You know, it's just a little bit of luck. But what we discovered is it's not. And that's what we've been working on, and that's what I want to share with you today, because this is something that we're really interested in. So this is the book that we'll be bringing out next year, called Iconic Advantage. The first thing is that companies need to have an innovation strategy. And a lot of companies are just doing the bandwagon thing, where everyone else in the industry is doing innovation. So we've got to be doing innovation. Okay, you know, that our competitors are investing in innovation, so we've got to be investing in innovation. That's the wrong reason to do it. That's like some pathetic corporate version of teenage peer pressure, isn't it? It's like, oh, everyone else is smoking. I'll try as well. You know, I'm going to try innovation. Everyone else is trying innovation. This is great. No, you need to actually have a reason to be investing in innovation, and you need to have something that directs what you do. And there's kind of things that people say, we want to have innovation because we want to future-proof, or we want to have innovation because we want to create new product lines, or we want to have innovation because we want to outdo our competitors. And what we discovered is that actually the motivation that you need is maybe a little bit surprising. And it's to become iconic. All right, bear with me here, because I know that you're thinking, what bullshit. You're thinking, no, that's about people just all into the glamour of it. You know, I want to be the next Steve Jobs. No. By iconic, I'm talking about actually becoming an icon. Think of what an icon is. It's the prototypical example within a category. So you want to be the prototypical example in your category that your audience thinks about. That's what we mean by being iconic. Because think of that. If your audience is then considering purchase or thinking about this area, then you get a free advert because you're the one that comes to mind right away at the right time. That's pretty good. So we discovered that with these successful products, and soon discovered from studies he'd done within the company. Here's a rough figure. This is rough. That if you looked at the top 14% of the products that you would consider to be the sort of most iconic ones, because that's what you're finding, particularly he was finding with his company, is the top 14% of the products that were sold were iconic products. They were responsible for over 80% of the revenue. That's a heck of a lot. So that meant that the rest of the products, the other 86% of the products were responsible for 20% of the profits across the business, you know? So you want to be something that is prototypical. You want to stand out. And we analyzed these companies, and we worked out that there's 3 parts to it. There's 3 parts to achieving this kind of iconic level. And they're quite simple. And they don't disrupt your company that much. And I'm going to share it with you because, you know, why not? You can't buy the book just now anyway, so, you know. The first thing that you need to do is you need to build what we call noticing power. Noticing power is being distinctive. It's being different in some way, either visually different or having a different belief or even being sensorially different. So for example, Harley Davidson. Yeah, the bikes look quite nice, but you notice a Harley Davidson by hearing it first, usually before you see it. So you know, they actually even tried to trademark the sound of a Harley engine. They failed, but they spent years trying to trademark the sound of the Harley engine. So the noticing power is being distinct in some way. There's got to be something that separates you from the rest in the category. And that can be a feature, that can be something that is less tangible than that, where it's a belief, but there has to be something that differentiates you. The second thing is going beyond the mind and getting into the heart, and that's the staying power. So that's the level of meaning. It has to have a meaning beyond just being distinctive. Now, if you think of the Nike Air trainer, you've got you can see the air bubble in the sole. Do you know, the first Nike Air trainer, you couldn't actually see the air bubble. It was a shoe called the Tailwind that did not take off at all, and it was hidden. It was completely hidden in the foam sole that you couldn't actually see the air bubble at all. It didn't take off. It was only when they did the Air Max in 1987 that there was this bubble, and you could look in it, and you can prod it with your finger, and when no one was looking, have a little sniff. But that was just me, is it? Yeah, probably just me. I'm the guy who goes into bookshops and goes, oh, that's lovely. You know, you have to sniff a book, don't you? Yes, thank you. There we go. I'm not the only crazy one. So it was sensorial and the benefits. So that was the noticing power, but the staying power was the fact that you understood the benefit of it. It had meaning, that you were walking on air. And that had a distinct benefit in a rational way because training shoes generally lose 40% of their bounce over their lifetime. And you don't lose that bounce with air. But it had this meaning that you could understand it just by looking at it. Right, and the next thing is scaling power. Scaling power is when you blow it out as big as you can, and you take it and you expand into different product lines is one way that you can do it, and the other way you can do it is through marketing and distribution to sort of get as many people seeing it as possible. So that's traditional, normal business stuff that you want to do. But you have to do these in order. You have to make something distinctive. You have to have some level of meaning that gets into people's hearts, that gets beyond the head and into people's hearts. And then you have to blow it out. Right? So it's really quite simple, these different steps. And every single one of these products that we were looking at, not just products, we were looking at brands, we were looking at things that were from automotive, fashion, we were looking at food. You know, we've been looking at all sorts of category and tech. And we were discovering that these principles work for every single one of these. So let me tell you a little bit of a story. Of course, you'll all know this car. I don't think anyone here would not know what this car is. And this car was around for about 50 years. About 5.5 million of them were built in their lifetime. They were different. They're quirky as hell. You know, but the thing is that they hardly changed. You see, from the first one that rolled off the production line in the 1950s was almost identical to the last one that rolled off the production line in 1998. They hadn't really changed the car. It was quirky, but it just hadn't kept up because they hadn't done constant innovation. So BMW bought the rights for this car, and they started working on it. And they took 20 design teams because they knew that they couldn't fuck up with this. This was a British icon, they're a German company. All right, let's not start anything, let's not screw with that British icon. Because all the English will do is they'll bring up the World Cup in 1966. Even though Germany has won it so many more times, it's only that one that matters to the English. So they took this and they wanted to work out what it was that the new Mini would look like. So these different design teams, 20 of them around the world working in this. The guy who won is a guy called Frank. And he's now the head of design for McLaren. I better learn his second name because I'm having dinner with him next month. Now, what he did was he was really clever. He realized that the car hadn't evolved during this time. So instead of just going, right, this was the car, now let's define what it is now, sort of 4 years after they stopped production of it. No, he took it all the way back. And he designed the car that would be the Mini of the 1970s. And then he designed the Mini of the 1980s. And then he designed the Mini of the 1990s. And then he designed the Mini of the 2000s. This one. And they worked out what it was that was the noticing power of the original Mini. And you know, it was the look. It looked distinctly different. And obviously one of the main things is the front of the car. So the round headlights, or the sort of oval headlights, that was very distinct. That was very Mini. And the grille looks a little bit like the mouth of a frog. So they worked out that the front of it is like a face. And it's got the childlike eyes of wonder, and it's got the smile of a frog. And they made sure that that was completely intact in the new one. That's the one thing that is really iconic, really noticeable. Do not change with that. And then they noticed that the car's actually in layers. It's almost like you can disassemble a burger, where you've got the different layers. You've got the roof. That's one layer, and then underneath that, you've got the windows, and that's another layer, and then underneath that, there's more layers. And it's stacked. It's extraordinary, and they discovered that none of the elements overlap with another element. They're all by themselves. And you'll notice this when you look at the car. And they've retained all of that, and they took these pieces and they put them back together again. And then when it came to the staying power, making sure that there was some kind of emotional level to this, they took the heritage of the car, and through the paint jobs, as well as the design, they harkened back to the 1960s. And they used the Union Jacks in some of them. And they used these interesting stripes that had been really cool for the racing Minis in the 1960s. So they were nodding to the heritage of the old Minis. So they put in the emotion as well as the rational noticing power. So you've got noticing power, you've got staying power, and then when it came to scaling power, I told you there's two different parts to scaling power. One part is blowing out your product line. And boy, did they do that. So they started to create variants of the car that weren't around originally. So they created soft-top versions. They created estates. They created a slightly bigger version, the Clubman, that is just the Mini, just where somebody's gone into Photoshop and just dragged one of the corners up 20%. You know, it's just a slightly bigger version of the Mini. I don't like it, but you know, they've managed to take the essence of it and grow it. And then they took it into different product lines as well. So you can actually get Mini luggage. You can get Mini kitchenware. For some reason, there's lots of stuff you can get for your dog. There's Mini brands. You can get Mini dog frisbees, quite seriously. Search for them online. I don't know why. And then they did lots of partnerships as well with other brands. So you could do Mini branded things with other companies. And then it came to the other bit, was getting it in front of as many eyeballs as possible. They invested a hell of a lot in marketing so that this thing was everywhere. They did some really clever stuff, and their distribution model was fantastic. They put this thing in as many places as possible, so it wasn't just in car showrooms, it was everywhere. Now that's clever. So they did the noticing power, that was how it looked. They did the staying power, that was getting the heritage, so it would get into your heart. And then they really blew it out with the scaling power. All right, it's not just about product. What about service and digital? Well, Amazon, one of the things, if you think about the success of them, people very often think, well, they've got everything and it's cheaper than anyone else. And well, actually, no, they don't have everything and it's not cheaper than anyone else. But it kind of feels a little bit that way. The real magic of Amazon is this button. It's the idea behind this button. One click. One click, I don't know if you can see there, but there's a little registered symbol there on the button. One click is in fact patented. No one can use Amazon one-click technology. And let's be honest, checkouts are painful. Online checkouts are awful. And I'd worked on advising some companies on online checkouts in the 90s and the early 2000s. And they were terrible, but they wanted to use these plug-in sort of things that they had, and they didn't want to disrupt stuff too much, and they felt it was important to make people feel safe that they've put in their address, and then, it was just awful. Amazon just went, well, tell you what, give us permission to just do it with one click of a button, and how about that, we're done. Now, it's not just this idea of doing it with one click of a button. It's not just the fact that you've shortened the journey. It is what is behind that. You see, that's the noticing power, is that they created this thing that was different. It was a service that was different. It was a process that was different. And Apple wanted to use this, of course. So Apple pay every year an undisclosed sum to use one-click technology in all of their stores. I don't know if you know that. So anything that you do through an Apple store, actually Amazon, they're paying Amazon money to be able to do that through just one click. So what's behind that? The staying power is the emotion that's behind it, it's the intent. Amazon is all about instant gratification because they know when people buy stuff, they want it now. If you go to the high street, you go and buy stuff, you have it now. That's what they're up against. That's what they're competing with. So this instant gratification is really important, and it starts from being able to just think about something, so much so that the button extends, of course, to physical stuff like that. That you're thinking of something, there's the right place, one click. And they've just done a deal in June or July with the British government to start testing drone deliveries so that there'll be certain products under a certain weight that you'll be able to get delivered by drone in under half an hour, getting you closer and closer to instant gratification. There's other stuff if you're within a city. They're creating hubs within cities, and they're really building in this in the US at the moment, but they're starting to spread it out across the world, which has got the most essential items within this city hub, which means that, seeing as that's where most people are, they'll be able to get stuff super quick because it's within a couple of miles of where they live. My wife has just bought some of these buttons. They became available in the UK last month. So she's bought some of these, and one of the things that she bought was some fairy washing up tablets. So it's really simple to set up. You get the button through and you connect it with the Amazon app on your phone. And then you put your first order in, and the £5 that you spent buying the button comes off your first order. So you get your money back, so the button in essence is free. So she set it up to do the minimum order of fairy washing tablets. I picked up that parcel 3 days ago, and when somebody came to the door, they handed it to me. It's like, whoa, this is the minimum order. 6 huge boxes of these washing tablets. We had to find a place to put them. I had to move around all sorts of stuff in the broom cupboard to be able to fit these things in. By the time we have to order more of these things, I think the battery will have run out on the button. We need to order a new button. It's a wee bit screwed up. But this is getting you another step towards instant gratification. And even going beyond the idea of one click, with Amazon Echo, you're able to just order by saying. And it understands, and it knows your account, and it will order stuff just by saying. It'll be the one grunt service that you need. It will understand when you're in the toilet, you've got no toilet paper. You'll be able to just shout. And just wait 20 minutes and a drone will turn up. with some toilet paper, maybe just on a roll, and just through the window, you just pull off a few sheets. I don't know. So you find that we've got the noticing power is the one click, and they protected that by patenting it. You've got the staying power, which is the emotion of it, which is this visceral idea of instant gratification. And then you've got the scaling power, where they've turned it into so many different ways of doing this. That is how it's built. And basically, what I'm wanting you all to consider is, when it comes to innovation, is you have value in what you already have. The products you already got, the services you're already doing, you have value in there. You're unlikely to have tapped all of that value. And if you follow these stages as a way of constant iteration, noticing power, staying power, scaling power, maybe 18 months or however long you feel is right, come back, do it again, noticing power, staying power, scaling power. Make it iterative, not disruptive. You will take your customers with you. It's far less risk to your company. The costs are spread out over time. I just feel it's a more sensible place to play, is this top right quadrant. You know, don't want to play there. You want to play there, baby, yeah? So think about being iconic. What can you do to take your product, your brand, your service, and make it the prototypical one that your audience thinks about when they think about your category? Actually, before I go, I want to tell you about something I'm excited about. Yesterday, I launched an online magazine. And you guys are kind of the audience for it. We've got one more thing. It's called Open-Xchange.org. Now, this is an online magazine where I've got incredible writers from all over the world who are sharing practical advice on how to use creativity and innovation within your business. Now, some of these people are people who are creative thinkers and strategic thinkers. Other people are, like, I've got the head of risk for JP Morgan in New York. I've got psychologists talking about the science of stuff. And this is about every area of the creative process. It's not just about coming up with ideas. It's about problem finding, it's about strategy, it's about insight, then coming up with ideas, and then it's about testing, it's about developing, it's about taking things to market, it's about protecting, and it's about managing creativity across a business. I'm loving reading the articles. It went up yesterday. I had over 1,000 hits yesterday on the first day, so I was quite happy. I want you guys to blow that out of the water. So please, go along to openforideas.org, sign up for the newsletter, visit. There's loads of really good advice on there, and it's going to be growing day by day with the amount of stuff that we've got going up. I want to thank you all very much again for tolerating my Scottish rants. I love you very much.